Hello guys, Joe with BitRaged. So the structure for Bitcoin has gotten a lot clearer, and now we see the break, the sell-off that we were expecting to happen. But I wanted to talk about the nature of what happened prior to that sell, and how you could get caught up in the pattern inside the pattern and miss the bigger picture. So as far as the nature of the correction versus the impulse, this is very clearly a correction, and how do we know that? If most of the move is corrective, if 80% of the move is corrective, we can class that as a correction and look at the pattern we're getting. If 80% of the move is impulsive, then we know that that is not a correction. And many times you'll be able to identify them really easily because the impulses cannot be seen as patterns, right? So for example, you couldn't take this part here and draw a pattern out of it. There wasn't anything here on the daily to draw a pattern out of. But usually it's very easy to identify a correction, a period of consolidation, the part where we're forming the pattern, because it's typically very low momentum, like you can see here on the daily. We had some impulsive movements inside of that, but the majority of the move is corrective. So jumping down here to the 4 hour, I wanted to address this because it's easy to get caught up in, let's say, this pattern here, for example. And this was a little bit more tricky. The reason for that is we had this spike up and the complete retrace. And so that can be really tricky to trade. So you see this descending channel here. This looks like a flag, right? It looks like it could possibly be that continuation to move up and head higher. But the bigger picture, what you have to understand is if there's ever a time where a pattern would, let's say, fail, for example, it would be because the higher time frame picture is telling us this is a sell. And so we can see that a lot of this move here is very corrective. This here is very corrective. We got some impulsive movements within it, but largely it's very corrective. And so when we got this descending channel, it is possible for this to act as a flag and get that break to the upside. But when we saw that rejection, it was a good indication that that break to the upside is not happening. That rejection has taken place, and this pattern is looking to play out. So if we look left in the pattern, I want to show you that this is not uncommon to see. And we saw this in some of the other patterns. So if we look at this pattern here, it's a very similar pattern. And then we got this descending nature, this descending channel, which you could take as a descending channel and a continuation to then break to the upside. But understanding that the bigger pattern is a continuation to the downside, taking a trade like this may be very, very short-lived, especially when the pattern is this developed. So if we look back to here, we had another pattern very, very similar. Bitcoin likes to create these patterns that are very, very similar. And so you could take this as a descending channel to break to the upside, but also you have to understand that this whole pattern is a continuation to the downside. And so you shouldn't get too caught up in this when the bigger pattern is telling us this is a big continuation to the downside. So it's not uncommon to see that sell straight from there. And so understanding the nature of the pattern and the bigger pattern is going to be crucial in understanding what to expect next. Because when we have a pattern that is this clear and this developed, it's very, very likely and very, very possible to see that sell. It's also worth noting here that we got the sell here at a double top area. So if we were looking at this, we got that right off of this double top as a rejection, which all that does is it increases the likelihood, increases the probability that we'll see that sell, and it's very possible that's why we got this rejection here. So as far as what to expect next, we have this nice impulse down, very, very clear. You can't mistake this for anything else. And so from here, we're simply looking for the market to give us that continuation and another sell. Keeping in mind that this continuation could be more like this, right? And still sell, doesn't change anything. We still get that bigger continuation to sell. The bigger the continuation, the bigger the sell. And we talked about this. When you have a pattern that is this big, the sell from it is going to be really, really impulsive. You're not going to get a tiny sell from a pattern like this. So that is a good thing to note down. The bigger the pattern, the bigger the sell from it, or the bigger the buy from it, depending on the nature of the pattern. So from here, we're simply looking for that continuation to continue the move, continue the impulse. We haven't got that clear continuation yet. It's looking like it's starting right now, but I would simply wait for 6 to 8 hours in a flag, or if it forms a bigger continuation, wait for that to fully develop and take that as a short. Because we have the impulse, we're looking for continuation to continue that move. The only thing that would change this is if from here we started to get the reverse of this. We started to get more of corrective nature in a down trend. So if we get corrective nature like this, especially if we get all the way to the trend line, it's very, very likely to see that move back to the upside. But as of right now, the only thing we can take from the market is that we had the impulse. We know the bigger pattern was a continuation. It was an ascending wedge. It broke. We have the impulse. We're simply looking for that continuation pattern to continue the move down. Now, for a target, go over this quickly. For a target, we're simply targeting the bottom of the correction. Because we know if we look at all the patterns before, they all got to the bottom of the correction. And if you do back test this, you'll find that very often when you break out impulsively from a pattern like this, you'll get to the bottom of the correction. It's very, very high probability. And so we're using that as a target. It's not a point where we would close a trade. Let's say you were in a short. It's not a point I would close a trade. It's a point I would watch if we got any kind of reversal pattern in the form of a descending channel, let's say like that. Even if we broke it, we would expect that to come back to the upside. But if we got, let's say, an impulse down and then maybe a continuation right on this level here, to see that sell is not uncommon at all. So it's a place to watch. It's not a place to close your trade. But that's our target as of right now. And that's what we're looking to see the market do. And I love the pattern that we have. It's getting clearer and clearer, and the structure is getting clearer and clearer. So it's really, really good. Bitcoin is really setting up nicely, and you can't argue with that. But that's about it. I did want to discuss the nature of how it did break, so you can take that and understand that if there is a bigger pattern, it is possible for that to play out, and then the smaller pattern within it doesn't play out exactly as you would expect. Even though we did get that breakout and the rejection, which made it a little bit clearer, it's very possible that we could have just correctively moved in a descending channel and then broke, because the higher time frame structure, the bigger pattern is a sell. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care now.